Nick Takavadii is a participatory leadership and collaboration enthusiast. He is a member, director, and co-owner of Percolab Coop, a social enterprise that develops and shares new ways of working, governing, and learning in service of a sustainable and peaceful future. His understanding of leadership was fundamentally transformed in 2006 when he discovered the art of hosting, aka Art of Participatory Leadership, at Kufunda Learning Village in Zimbabwe. His unlearning and relearning continues as he uncovers and shares new ways of working with teams, groups, and organizations.
Thanks so much for the introduction. Like you introduced, we develop and design new ways of working, learning. I just want to share that I am based here in Brisbane, and we like to call ourselves an archipelago, which is cooperatives based in Brisbane, Montreal, France, and another hub coming up in Vietnam. We work in the areas where we are, but we self-organize, and we also work collaboratively across all spaces and places. I will share my life story based on the SDG 4, the education part, and my work part. Then I will share how that has moved to the work that I do in Percolab today, which is around conscious, courageous, creative collaboration. Looking at the slide here, on my left, you've got the triangle, and on the right, there's a circle. The triangle has got straight lines and a sharp tip point, which sort of represents some form of hierarchy, which is common in our organizations, with a top-down structure of people at the top and the povo or the plebiscites at the bottom, and instructions flow from the top going down, and requests and permissions flow going upwards. On my right is the circle, representing more like the living system, which is regenerative. All elements matter, just like it is in nature. Nothing is wasted. Now, going to my story, I was born in Zimbabwe. Well, it was called Rhodesia then, in a very segregated country at that time. And when I was in school, if people asked me, what do you want to be? I very much remember this in primary school. What do you want to be? A lot of the other kids were doctor or nurse. That was the common among the Black kids. And I wanted to be an astronaut. And that was after reading about the Americans landing on the moon. And also in one of the set books in school, there was a story of Juma Tapela and his moon rocket. So I really wanted to be a hero. So even in school, I went through with the sciences. And after high school, I got a scholarship to go to Cuba to study electrical engineering. Whilst I was waiting for the semester to start, so because the first semester was going to be learning Spanish, I got a job with a merchant bank. This was a suit and tie job. Very prestigious and very well-paying job. And in that job, I reported to, I'll just call him Mr. Jacob Sitole. Jacob had been with the merchant bank for 15 years. He had risen through the ranks. And I joined with 3 other colleagues. And at the time of joining, he took us through the orientation, and he made sure that we knew that he was the boss. All communication, there was no bypassing to go up to the other department. He knew everything. He was the holder of information. Even going to the toilet, he needed a permission from him to go to the toilet if it wasn't during the lunch break, which growing up, that was part of the education that we had as well. It was very common. Excuse me, ma'am, excuse me, sir, may I leave the class? And you'd get the permission to do that. Because this was a suit and tie, we were told as you walk in, you need to be dressed up like that. He even monitored the length of our neckties. Not too long, not too short. Mistakes were not permissible. They were a prohibited sin. It was clear to me that being a bank clerk was not for me. And because I had done computer science, which had been introduced at my A level, At the same time, I'd applied to go on a course with one of the organizations, and the training director gave me a call offering me a job with what was the biggest IT company. It was called CF Tallies. It doesn't exist anymore. And for me, that was not even a decision to make. I just switched for that job and it paid me less. But I was happy in that job. But the organization still had it was shaped like that triangle on the left. Fast forward, I was a director of an IT company, and God works in mysterious ways. I ended up working with banks, supplying software for the banks. We had some asset management systems that were developed, unit trust system, banking systems, business intelligence. So we were connecting onto the banking systems and doing all the analysis for the executives. And the challenge with that was the tools were meant for the executives to use, but we had the IT departments being the hogger of those tools. So they were empowered now to quickly show and deliver quick results and reports that the managers were requesting and asking for. I got involved now. My history before was writing code, maybe even locked up in a server room. This time, I was now involved in hiring, in training, in coaching, and even coaching people that were technical people into elevating them to become team leaders. I came across many challenges. And in the process, I had also been in the evenings and weekends. I was a dancer and I was involved with a professional dance company. And we went on a retreat. And at that retreat, I discovered a practice called the art of hosting. The person that hosted us at Kufunda Learning Village was an art of hosting practitioner. And that really opened up my world to see that there's a different way of managing. The way I had been involved in leading my organization, as well as working in my colleagues in leadership, was very much a monkey see, monkey do. What I had seen other leaders do is what I copied and what I was doing and working with them. But there was a lot of stress involved with that. Now, moving forward, just the same strides again. We work in organizations that are mechanical, triangle on the right. Some of them you can't get rid of that, and also living systems, which is a worldview that is more aligned with our values of respect, relationships, and collective care. Whereas on the left, with the triangle, is cohesion, individualism, superiority. How can our workplaces be spaces for flourishing for people and for planet? This is the question that I had been carrying all along. So when I moved to Australia and I joined what was Campfire then, which then became part of Percolab in 2023, this has been a continued exploration of this question. I'll just share a little bit of what's happening now in the state of the world. A number of reports have come out. I know Price Waterhouse produced a report today of the survey that they did with the managers, and they were looking at the changes that are needed for our organizations to move forward. And one thing that was clear is that some of our organizations are complacent. We are still predicting that the next 5 years would be what it is, but a lot is changing. There's so many technologies. Even myself, what I learned back then in programming is very different from what is needed in the world today. Just looking at the statistics, for example, TELUS Mental Health in 2024 shows that 1 in 3 workers in Australia have a moderate to high mental health risk. 45% say their mental health is negatively impacting their productivity at work. A 2024 report by Boston Consulting Group cited 53% of Australian workers claim burnout symptoms, and they recommend inclusion as the key for beating burnout. And aside from being a legal requirement for the goal for SDG 3, mentally healthy workplace also benefits the bottom line. So this is not just about being nice and nice to people. It benefits the bottom line. Price Waterhouse, again, estimates that mental health conditions cost Australian workplaces more than $10.9 billion annually. According to the Gallup report, Southeast Asian countries' engagement continues to remain critical at 23%. Whilst organizations are working towards positive ESG impacts, much of the changes they're bringing are just external, they're focusing outside. And there's a need to focus on the inside. So shifting our organizations to bring psychological safety, equity, inclusion is important. Healthy organizational culture and work arrangements that support autonomy, employee well-being are crucial to reducing stress and employee burnout. So this doesn't just require tinkering, it requires a real shift to move from the mechanical system to the more living system. Moving forward, at Percolab, the founder of Percolab, Samantha Slade, has put together, we do experiments and come with many practices for working in organizations and practices for collaboration. And we have 7 domains of practice which are documented in that book. And these are autonomy, learning and development, relationships, purpose, meetings, transparency, and decision making. Within each of these, we have a number of practices that we share with organizations when we engage. So we teach, we share, and we also help work with people to pick up and practice these. So for example, autonomy brings about psychological safety. When people can choose what they want to do, the real change can come about. Purpose, becoming the invisible leader. Meetings have got a bad name, and it's time to change that. For example, in Percolab, our meetings are not always chaired by one person. The roles rotate, and there's a lot of transparency. The way we make decisions, we use generative decision making most of the time, but there's a whole suite of different decision making practices. Usually, a lot of people know about voting and autocratic ways and consensus, which is very painful of getting everybody to agree. So bringing all these together, learning and development, very important for organizations. And then relationships and conflict, making conflict something to work with. How do we do this? We bring in practices that allow for collaboration. We bring listening, visual, relationships, stories, a lot of stories. We have a game that we created called Listen For. And here's a set of cards here, which is based around those 7 domains. And I'll share a link where you can join for free online to play that game, to just practice listening in your organizations. And shared power is the key thing in what we do. And we also very much work with place, connection to country, connection to land. And what we do is it's not all new things. We are bringing in some of the ways that traditional people have been working over the time. And it's just a remembering of bringing those to the fore. There are some conscious practices that we do in Percolab. We have self-determined salaries. And when we work on projects, the people that work on projects determine how much the distribution of that money is done. And that can be very confronting for people. But once you get used to it, it's really one of the practices that I cherish in our work at Percolab. We also have created an event called Conflict Cafe, where people come in for an hour. They have a menu and they pick up practices for collaboration that they work, and we host them in that practice. We bring them, we started them in Canada, and we have introduced them here in Brisbane, and we run them in France as well. Our work is transformative. focusing on inner development goals, and it's horizontal and egalitarian. And we bring in play. Play is very important in the work we do. That's how the workplace can be thriving. This is lesson 4 that I mentioned. So I want to invite you to, in conclusion, to just complete this question for me. Based on just what I've shared here, what's prompting you to thrive in my work? I would like more of dash, dash, dash. So the invitation is for you to pop that in the chat and just share with us what it is that you believe would make your workplace a thriving, flourishing, and place full of psychological safety, full of productivity and growth for the organization. Thank you very much for your time.